So this is my 2010 Ford Explorer ST. Just got done putting in the new intercooler. All in all, I spent about 9.5 hours start to finish. Ran into lots of problems. So hopefully, if you watch this video, you can avoid the same mistakes I made and install yours much quicker. Alright, we're about to start the intercooler install. I like to start with the easiest thing first. There we go. Look at that, disconnected. Basically those two release tabs right there. Gotta hit them both at the same time, lift up, lift that up, and just slide that out of there. Next thing you want to do is in the wheel well. There's that 7mm screw, this one, and this one. So 4 total. And then these 2 push pins. I want to pop those out. And then this whole thing will just pull off. And do that on both sides. First thing you want to do is disconnect the negative battery terminal while you're working on it. It's just a 10mm bolt. Loosen it and then lift the terminal off. Alright, now that those tabs are out of the place, you can just pull back on this. And you see this sensor here. Just need to squeeze on the release tab on the back side of it, pull it down to disconnect it. Alright, so here's the 2 10mm bolts. One up there at the top. And then that one. Those are not fun to get to. So there they are. What I ended up having to use to get those out is this little swivel ratcheting wrench. Try to ratchet, there just is not enough room up in there, at least for my ratchets, to actually move it at all. But once you get the first 4, 5, 6 rotations, once you get the Loctite to bust loose, you can reach up and basically remove it with your fingers. It's not super tight once you get the Loctite busted loose. But yeah, that's probably the biggest pain in the butt of this whole thing, is those 2 bolts on each side. I hope so anyways. Also, to get a little more room to work, pull out that pin right there as well. That'll give you a little more room to pull the fender liner back to get up at those bolts. Alright, passenger side, 2 10mm bolts are out. Honestly, now that I knew which tool to use, it really wasn't that bad. That bolt on the left was kind of a pain just because of all that Loctite. But yeah, if you find a tool that works even better than this adjustable wrench, post it in the comments. I'm sure it would be very much appreciated by anyone who's going to do this in the future. But yeah, that's the tool that worked for me the best. Alright, those were enough of a pain in the butt. We're going to switch to something easier. Got that bolt, 2, 3, 4 along the top. You want to disconnect this plug. this part rotates up to unlock it. You just want to kind of use a screwdriver there to push down. While pulling up on the plastic. And the plug just comes right out. There we go. You also want to pop that out. Alright, now across the bottom, 7mm bolt. One there. One there. Third one right there. Fourth one, fifth one. I think there's 7 total across the bottom. So it looks like I missed a bolt. Right there, one on each side. Looks like that has to come off. So the last step is, this is stuck through up there where you took the 2 10mm bolts out of. And from up here, you have to squeeze on those and kind of push the bumper that way so that those come out of that little hole right there. I just used a flat blade screwdriver, reached up in through there, pushed on it just enough to get them started, and then from the front just gave it a little yank and it popped right off. So there's 4 plugs that you have to disconnect. Actually, maybe 5. This one on the driver's side. This one you just squeeze as you're pulling it down from the connector. That one is right there, right behind the crash bar. This one also, you just squeeze that while you're pulling down. This one, I think you squeeze on the other end of it. Yeah, this, you squeeze down on that while you're pulling it apart, it pops right off. And then same thing with this one. That one connects to that one. Squeeze that tab while you're pulling it down. And then this one for the, I think that's for the washer for the camera. That one you kind of squeeze on those ends while you're pulling it apart, and it'll pop right off. And that's what the other end of it looks like. But yeah, once you get those plugs off, there she is. The bumper is completely off. Now we can start on the fun stuff. Alright, to take the core support off, do that bolt, that one, and that one. Those are 10mm. Might be 1 or 2 on the bottom. We'll see when we get there. And then also for the crash bar, those are 13mm, 4 on that side and 4 on that side to remove the crash bar. You can see that little notch. Once those are off, you have to lift it up to pull it out so that notch doesn't break. Alright, next we're going to remove the headlights. 10mm bolt there, there, and one on top. Same thing on the other side. 10 mil, 10 mil, 10 mil, 10 mil. There'll probably be a plug we have to disconnect. And those will pop right off. Alright, so I missed a bolt. There's that one, that one, and then this one hiding over there in the corner. Then when you pull it out, you kind of slide this end towards you, and then there's a plug on the back. It'll look like that. You just squeeze that tab as you're pulling it out, and then the whole headlight is disconnected. I didn't catch this when I did the passenger side, but the trick to getting these out is this is kind of notched. So you have to lift up on that as you're pulling it back towards the front of the vehicle to get it off. Just kind of like slides into that little hole there. So you kind of lift up on it while you're sliding it towards the front of the vehicle, and it'll come right out, and then you can get the plug off the bottom of it. Alright, so it looks like that bolt has to come off, and that one. Those are 10 millimeters. Maybe those ones weren't supposed to come out. Yeah, those were supposed to stay. Don't take those two out. We'll reattach that here in a minute. Alright, so now we gotta take out that 10 millimeter bolt. That 10 millimeter bolt. There's one back there, it's a little dark. That one. And one right back there. So 4 10 millimeter. Let's see if it comes out after that. Alright, that 8 millimeter bolt, that one, and that one need to come off. Not sure how I missed those. Right there in the open. Alright, next we got to disconnect this pipe, just a 7 millimeter on the clamp, loosen it up, pull it out. So second biggest pain in the butt of this is disconnecting that. I end up using this, just pushing in on it and kind of pulling on this and pushing on that all at the same time. It finally popped off, but yeah, that was a pain in the butt. Maybe there's some special tool that helps on that. I don't know. I don't have it. But just a trim tool is what I ended up using. Just pushing on it right through there while just pulling on it, and it finally popped off. So as it turns out, the 10 millimeter bolts were not the most fun part. Right there, right there, right back there are rivets. And right there, and right there. So I've drilled out the ones I can reach. Basically just drill out the center of it. That is a 1/4 inch bit. And it doesn't take a lot of drilling, it's just about 5-10 seconds and they pop off. But my bit is not long enough to reach those. So I got 2 more left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there were 6 total I had to drill out. Still got 2 more I gotta do. So I gotta figure out a way to get a drill bit way back in there on those last 2, and then it should pop out. So once I drilled those all out, it came out much easier. So you just lift from the bottom, and then from the top, it sits on these posts. So you have to lift the top up off of those before you pull it out. And also, there's a plug right here that you have to remove from the sensor there. But then the core support just pulls right off. And there is the stock intercooler. Not very big. Alright, we want to disconnect the map sensor. It's a T30. Just take that screw out and pull the map sensor out. Which is stuck, just kind of twisted as you pull. That way you don't damage it. And we also want to loosen this right here. That way the hose will come right off. This side, same thing, loosen this. And then that 8mm bolt needs to come off. So to disconnect this guy, there's little tabs on each side. Basically, you squeeze down on those and then pull on this. And once that is pulled out, it just slides right off. So on this side of the intercooler, there's a little tab right there that goes down, so you have to lift it up to get it from hooked in behind that. Mine was in there pretty tight. I had to give it a pretty good little yank to get it up out of there. On this side, you just press down on this tab while you're pulling back. And then once I take this hose out, the intercooler should come right off. A little tip for getting these hoses off: if you have a pick, just kind of get it in the edges there and just kind of break the seal. Just run it around as much of the hose as you can to break it free, and it'll come off a lot easier. 2 to 3 hour job, my ass. So one thing that I discovered by accident that made this side a lot easier, this little clamp comes off. I don't know how it came off, just kind of did. I squeezed on it, popped off. It gave me a lot more wiggle room on this pipe. So definitely pop that off. But yeah, new intercooler is in. Support brackets are in. This piece down here that these brackets go into is kind of pointed downward, so they weren't lining up. I just had to grab it and basically pull up on it real hard to get it back to level. But yeah, the way I did it was I put this hose on first, then I got the hook down there on that end, and then I came over to this end to get this hook right there into place, and that was probably the hardest part. Definitely would have been a lot easier with a second set of hands, but once I got that popped in there, the rest of it went pretty smooth. So we're about 4.5 hours in now. Gonna start putting her back together. Hopefully be done before the sun goes down. So fair warning, if you're expecting this intercooler install to take 2 to 3 hours, I hope you have a wide selection of tools and a second set of hands. That will be very helpful. I actually got stuck, reached an impasse yesterday, ran out of time, ran out of daylight. What I'm having trouble with is this little post right here needs to go into the core support, and it's just not lining up. Whenever I push the core support in, it just kind of pushes this. So it's like you need a second person, one to push on this, one to push on the core support. The other issue is, I think when I had trouble getting the core support loose, I took out some bolts that maybe I should not have. So this little piece that the intercooler posts are supposed to go into keeps bending down. Same thing on this side. So if you do run into trouble like me and you need to move your car, whether it be out of the garage, into the garage, whatever, I just put a couple bolts in the top of the core support just to hold it, plug the map sensor back in, plug this plug back in, and reconnect your negative cable. You can start the vehicle up, move it wherever you need to. Get a bunch of warning lights, but you will be able to move it. So day 2, I'm gonna take the core support back off, put some bolts in the bottom, and hopefully that'll help line it up and get her back together. So I think where I messed up was I took a couple of these bolts out of right here and here, which allows this whole piece to drop down. So I'm gonna put a little floor jack underneath it just to lift it back up, put those bolts back in, and hopefully that will allow me to get the core support back on and back in the right place. Alright, that seems to have done the trick. So when you get to the part of the video where I tell you to take these 4 bolts out, don't do it. Those are 13mm bolts. They do not need to come out. Don't do it. Alright, so I think I solved another mystery. These are supposed to stay on the radiator. They're not supposed to come out with the core support. So if your core support comes out with those still stuck in them, you'll need to get them out. You can see I snapped the release tab on that one, and I broke the tab on this one. So I'm probably not the best person to tell you how to get them out, but basically there's little squeeze tabs there on the side. You kind of lift on this piece so that it comes out of this, and it slides right out the back of the core support. So hopefully the core support will go back on and fit now, and then we can put it all the way back together. Alright, we got the core support on. So it is much easier when these tabs are disconnected from the core support. Much, much easier. So yeah, if you somehow manage to get your core support off with those still attached, remove those before you try to put the core support back on, because you will not be able to get it back on. There's just not enough height between this and the top of the radiator to get it on top of those pegs. I tried for a good hour and a half yesterday. So yeah, pulling those out made a world of difference. Now we can put the whole thing back together. Finally. Another reinstallation tip: when you're putting the crash bar back on, it's a little bit easier to get it in the right spot if you take the shroud off that goes around this. You just pull on it, it comes pretty much right off. When you put it back on, you just line up these little tabs here with these openings. They go all the way around, including around that air duct. But when you put the crash bar back on, you want to make sure it's behind this little piece of plastic. So you want to seat the bottom of the crash bar first on each side. Just make sure it's behind that, and then you can lift up to hook it over top of that little hook on each side, and then just tighten all 8 bolts. Put the shroud back on, just pops in, and then continue putting her back together. Another reinstallation tip. This one makes me want to cry. So I'm to the point where I can put the headlights back on and then throw the bumper on, and I would have been done. But the plug that goes to this big plug, I forgot about in my excitement at getting the core support back in. And the plug is right there, stuck behind the core support. So when you're putting the core support back in, make sure you get that plug up here at the top, out of the way, so you don't have to tear it all the way back apart again, because that would probably suck. Alright, so if you're dumb like me and you get that wire stuck down there, take the shutter back off, take the crash bar back off, take this little plastic piece up top off. I took that bolt out and I loosened these two, and then I was able to reach down, way down there, and grab the bundle and bring it back up top. So not horrible, only about an extra 10 minutes worth of work, but when you're putting the core support back on, just make sure that wire's up there and save yourself the 10 minutes. Especially if you're on day 2, every little thing will just enrage you at that point. So yeah, I'll have to find some new zip ties, because I did have to cut the zip ties that were supplied with the intercooler back off just to loosen the bottom. So we'll get back to putting everything that I just took off back on, and then we'll put the headlights on, put the grill on, hopefully plug everything in, take her for a test drive. So we're almost done. Putting the grill back on, definitely second set of hands would help for sure, but the way I did it was I got the top kind of hooked on here and then went over to the side and made sure this was just inside of this, pushed it up until that plastic piece clipped in. Then I went on the other side, did the same thing over here, although it doesn't seem like it's clipped in, so hopefully the 10mm bolts will snug that up. And also with the 10mm bolts, I took a wire brush and a Dremel, and I just tried to get as much of the Loctite that they had coated on these things, so hopefully that'll help the bolts go in a little smoother and make the process a little bit easier. But yeah, we're just about there, so hopefully we'll put the last few bolts in, start it up, and not have any crazy codes pop up on the dashboard. Since I had to start it up with a bunch of stuff unplugged, before I take it for a ride, I am going to clear the engine codes. That way, if there are any codes, once I take it for a test drive, I'll know that they're new and not left over from when I just started up with a whole bunch of stuff unplugged from it. And then hopefully we'll have some lower intake temps. If this video helped you, please do hit the subscribe button and stay tuned for a future video where I will show the difference in stock intercooler intake temperatures and the Whipple intercooler intake temperatures. Thank you for watching. Alright, codes are cleared. Let's start it and see if we have any errors. Well, sweet baby Jesus. Hallelujah. No errors.